Well, good morning. It's good to see you all. And I'm going to share from this psalm this morning. We'll come back to Paddington later, just in case you wonder what that was all about. Psalm 37. It's a long psalm, 40 verses long. And I wondered if Nay was ever going to get to an end of it. But I knew she was, because I was there when we filmed it. So, but yeah, it's a long psalm. It's a very special psalm to myself and my wife, because Derek Tidball was the guy who preached at our wedding, and he preached from some of the verses in Psalm 37, and they've tracked with us down the years. It's a kind of psalm that when you come to it, you think, well, what is this really all about? So we call it a wisdom psalm. In the Bible, there's parts of the Bible we call wisdom literature. So the book of Proverbs, for example, the book of Ecclesiastes, they're called wisdom literature. When you get through the Psalms, quite a few of the Psalms are wisdom psalms. This is one of them. In the New Testament, quite a few of Jesus' teachings are wisdom teachings. Some teachers about the book of James would say James has kind of got its roots in the wisdom literature of Scripture. So Psalm 37 is long because every single verse is a verse based on the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So for us it'd be a bit like, A is for advice. Seeking advice is wise. Or B is for being humble. That's a good approach to valuing others higher than yourself. C is for courage. Facing the odds of life and walking through fears better than running away. So you get it? So kind of A is for something, B is for something, and C is for something, and then they do that with the Hebrew alphabet. So every single verse is kind of standalone, if you will, almost through the psalm. But we're going to pick out some aspects of it, because you might have noticed that when Nay read it, there's quite a bit of stuff about kind of wicked people, quite a bit of stuff about what they do and what they get up to and what's going to get up to them. And then there's quite a bit about following God and thinking about God, and then also about what God will do with wicked people and what God will do with people who are following him. So we're going to pick up on some of those kind of themes this morning. But the psalm kind of begins and ends with a little bit of a focus about the wicked, or those who are evil. Verse 1 says, "Do not fret when those who are doing wrong or evil, and don't be envious of them for doing wrong." In other words, don't you start worrying or looking over your shoulder or looking over their shoulders to see what they're up to. So that's verse 1. Roll forwards towards the end of the psalm, and it's almost like he picks that theme up again when he says, "I've seen a wicked and ruthless man flourishing like a luxuriant native tree." It's everything you ever wanted to was be compared to a tree, wouldn't it? But anyway, I mean, guys, that's a really good chat-up line, isn't it? Hey, you look like a luxuriant native tree. Just try it, see where it goes. But what the psalmist is really saying is this. We have within us a great temptation to envy things like wealth or fame or power or success. And the psalmist sees those in wicked people and kind of almost is saying, hey, they seem to have done all right through life. And I haven't done as well as them, and they've got to where they've got by any means, fair and foul, and I've tried to walk a narrow path with God, and they've done really, really well. How come? And the psalmist basically saying it's easy to envy even wicked people when they seem to have done well. And we live in a world without a shadow of a doubt where we're rolling the clock forward 3,000 years from this psalm to now, and some of those issues are still hanging around. They don't go away because they're heart issues. They don't go away from who we are in our hearts. Temptation to envy wealth, envy success, envy fame, envy power. I've got to tell you, I know that whenever I see a Premiership footballer, I like his skills, but time and time again I think about, he's doing all right. He's earning £300,000 a week. You know, do the maths. That's £1 million a month. They're doing all right. And I'll often think about it. I think about somebody who's really ultra wealthy and think, yeah, they're doing all right. And the psalmist says we've all got that temptation. Or somebody who's beautiful, or somebody who's powerful, or somebody who's famous, and we're told to look up to them and we see them and we look up to them and value them, and in the end we devalue what we're doing and how we're living, and we think that's the way to live, and what we're doing doesn't have as much to say for itself. And the psalmist says, whoa, stand back from all that. Don't get tempted and don't get envious from those kind of things. Back in the 50s and the 60s of the last century, there was a guy called Edward Bernays who you may or may not know, it doesn't matter, but he was actually the son-in-law of Freud, the great psychologist. And Bernays was particularly interested in the way that propaganda had been used in Germany through the rise of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, and the power that propaganda had had on that society. So much so that the German people believed Hitler, believed the stories of the Third Reich and the 1,000-year reign, and all that it meant for them to produce this super race of Aryans and all that. And they believed it, they lived for it, and they fought for it, and then they died for it. Right? But Bernays thought, hang on a minute, that propaganda machine was so successful, why don't we take it and put it somewhere else? And so in the late 50s and the early 60s in America, he took it to marketing. And he standardized a marketing approach that appealed to us, appealed to our deepest desires, to make us feel like we wanted and even needed the services or the products that the industrial companies had on offer. Probably best summarized by one of the big bankers of that era, a guy called Lehman, who eventually went bust. You might remember the story of the Lehman brothers and the bankers going bust. But this is what Paul Mazur of Lehman Brothers was saying at the time. We must shift America from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old has been entirely consumed. Yeah, just got to get that new iPhone, even though mine's still working. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. Wow. This could have come straight out of Psalm 37, where the psalmist says, don't you envy or desire the wealth, the success, the fame, and the power of the wicked, because that will consume you. It will consume you. And people like Mazur and people like the Freud's son-in-law were basically saying, look, let's take all that, apply it to our culture, and the whole of a Western world that includes you and me has been brought up not on a needs-based society, but we've actually been brought up on a greed-based society. We've just got to have and have and have and have and have more. Apparently, and this is only in America, apparently the average American home has over 300,000 things in it. Can you imagine? And I thought, that's terrible. And then I began to think about everything in my house. I don't know if it would get to 300,000, but I'll tell you what, it would be a big clear out to get rid. Because we just keep having and having and having more. And the psalmist says, whoa, let's stand back from that. Let's have a think about that. One of my daughters works with L'Oreal and some of the subsidiary companies around L'Oreal, and I was really interested because they do a lot of media stuff. And she told me that one day they hired in an influencer, and this influencer works on things like TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff. And she was paid £20,000 for the day because she's an influencer, right? And you think, well, what's an influencer? Well, Paddington Bear's an influencer. When the Paddington movie came out, marmalade sales went up by 2%. You might not think that, but if you're Mrs. Dewar, and your marmalade sales have gone up by 2% because Paddington movies come out, you just can't wait for the sequel. And it has come out, and it is worth a watch. Listen to this, though. That clip you just watched with Paddington and the Queen at her Jubilee, when that came on and people watched that, marmalade sales went up by 20%. Now, who's the influencer? Our late beloved Queen Elizabeth II. Now, that's all I'm saying is that's the power. Now, if you don't like marmalade, that's fine. Just a tip: you should try marmalade and Marmite on toast together at some point. Seriously. It's the most dangerous sandwich in the world. It's called the Marmalite. Don't knock it till you've tried it. You'll go and get sweet and sour at the Chinese. Have sweet and sour on your toast. Look, anyway, that's by the by. Shows what a bad influencer I am. You're all turning up your noses, right? Marmalade, you just love it or hate it, don't you? Anyway, the psalmist says, stand back. What are you going to let really influence you? What are you going to let really touch your life? And then he says this: we live in this world of comparisons. We live in this world where we're looking over other people's shoulders and just seeing what have they got, what are they like, and we're comparing all the time. Comparing beauty, we're comparing bodies, we're comparing wealth, jobs, careers, comparing homes, comparing holidays, comparing cars, comparing status, comparing followers, how many numbers of followers we have, comparing fame. We do it all the time. One holiday advert is she rolls up at the desk to book in at a hotel and finds out the person next to her has booked in for a holiday and got it a lot cheaper on Trivago, for goodness sake. And it's just ruined her holiday for her. So we live in this world of comparisons and values, and the psalmist says, whoa. And so, first of all, he looks at how wicked people behave. Now, we look at wicked and we think, well, that's not about wicked, is it? It's not about somebody who's had a better holiday than me. It's not about wicked. But hang on a minute. What the psalmist means, and the Bible means by wicked, is when we assert our own desires and our own will, and in doing so ignore God's ways. So it's not like you're ultra wicked. It's just that if you're saying what I want and what I desire is more important than fixing my heart and my mind on God, then the psalmist says, whoa, that's wicked. The state of being wicked, it's a mental disregard for justice, for righteousness, for truth, for honor, for virtue. It's got evil in its thoughts and life. It can be depraved, sinful, and criminal. And the psalmist says, let's look at what they do. Let's look at what they're like. In verse 12 he says, they're against the righteous and they gnash their teeth at them. And nowadays, we gnash our teeth, it's fine. You can go and get a more beautiful set of dentures, pay 800 quid, and it's fine. But no, he says the wicked gnash their teeth at righteousness. It says in verse 14, they draw the sword and bend the bow and bring down the poor and needy to slay those whose ways are upright. Verse 21, the wicked borrow, they don't repay. In other words, the psalmist says, don't be envious of people who are walking away from God. Don't be envious of people whose values don't honor God's ways and ultimately, at the end of the day, disregard God's heart for justice, God's heart for loving other people. And when the stuff that you're drawing into your life, because this world, this culture is saying envy's okay, wanting better, wanting bigger, wanting more, when those things are okay and they overtake God's heart for valuing people, for valuing justice, for valuing care, then that's wicked. Because it's not God's way. Then the psalmist writes about what happens to them. He says, a little while, the wicked will be no more. You look for them, they'll not be found. Verse 20, the wicked will perish, and the Lord's enemies, they're just like flowers of the field. They look pretty while they're there, but they're consumed, and they go up in a puff of smoke. Verse 16, better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. But the power of the wicked will be broken. The Lord upholds the righteous. Verse 28, wrongdoers will be completely destroyed. The offspring of the wicked will perish. So what the psalmist, the songwriter, and that's the thought I was having when I was preparing, how would you sing a song about all this? 40 verses, and this is a song that they would sing. Why do you sing a song? Well, one of the reasons they sang songs is because it taught them truth. And the songs got into their hearts and their mind. You know when you get a tune in your head, you can't get it out. Well, the idea of this is there's meant to be a tune in your head that you can't get out. And the tune is, God's ways are better. The tune is, following God with all your heart is 1,000,000,000 times better than looking over the fence and envying what the other man has got. The psalmist seems to be summing it up as, your wealth lasts as long as the length of your life, if that. And that God's judgment is against wickedness. So then, how should we behave? How should we kind of say, okay, if that's a minefield that the psalmist, the songwriter's singing about and warning us not to go near, how do we walk in a different way? How do we find a different path for living? I think the verses 3 to 7 kind of sum this up so powerfully. And these were the verses that were preached at our wedding 41 and a half years ago. Verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he'll do this. He'll make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord. Wait patiently before him. Don't fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their evil schemes. Refrain from anger. Turn from wrath. Don't fret. It leads only to evil. The psalmist is saying, look, there's a better way. There's a different way. There's a higher value than looking over your shoulder at what this Western world has rooted into the greedy needs of our culture and our society. And he's saying, will you walk that way? Will you let go of that greedy need base? And will you set your heart on God? hanging on to that stuff leads to envy and bitterness and self-centeredness. Holding out for God will lead to following his ways of justice and righteousness and love and care. Which person would you rather be? Envious? Bitter? Angry? Jealous? Or just, loving, caring, and God-honoring? The songwriter, the psalmist, verse 30 says this: the mouths of the righteous utter wisdom, and their tongues speak what is just. The law of God is in their hearts, and their feet do not slip. In other words, the psalmist says there's a better way, and it's his way. And one of the powerful things that wisdom literature is always giving us is a choice. It's saying, look, I've shown you one way, I've shown you another way. Which will you take? What happens to us? Well, the psalmist goes on to talk about what happens to the wicked and then what happens to the righteous. So just a brief look at that. The wicked, he says, the evildoers will be cut off. Verse 9 said, evildoers, God laughs at the wicked because he sees their day coming. The righteous, well, there's a good list. The righteous get the desires of their heart because their heart is for God. He gives them himself. The righteous, God will bring out their righteousness. He'll establish their steps. He will uphold their hand. He will not forsake his saints. Verse 34, they will the ones who inherit the land. Verse 39, above everything, he gives salvation to the righteous. Choose wisdom. Choose virtue over vice. Choose generosity over greed. Trust in God instead of taking everything for yourself. So the choice is yours. But as we kind of come to the end of this psalm, I want to point you forward to Jesus. Because the psalmist is saying, get your eyes off what's around you. Get your eyes off the things that are going to fill your heart with need and greed and envy and jealousy. And get your eyes on something better. And I want to point your eyes to someone better as we close. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 12 simply says this: fix your eyes. And what he's really saying is fix your heart, fix your mind, fix your life. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, he scorned its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so you'll not grow weary and lose heart. Will you put your eyes and fix your eyes on Jesus? The one who is so full of love, so full of grace, so full of forgiveness, so full of kindness. The one who reached out to touch unclean lepers. The one who healed and spoke powerfully to a woman at the well who'd had, 5 husbands, and now she was living with a partner. And lived with the shame of that she had to go and draw water at the well at the noonday in the heat of the day, because then nobody else would be there to scorn her or spurn her. And Jesus speaks kindly to her. Will you fix your eyes on this Jesus? Will you fix your eyes on Jesus, who said, well, people have got everything, but the Son of Man, he's got nowhere to lay his head. Will you fix your eyes on this Jesus? Will you fix your eyes on this Jesus who spoke to a man called Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus was a tax collector, so he was seen as a Roman collaborator. Not just that, he was creaming off the top and he was taking off the bottom. And Jesus said to Zacchaeus, the world doesn't like you. This society around here has rejected you, but I want to come and eat with you today. And because of that, Zacchaeus' life is utterly transformed, and Jesus said, today, salvation has come to this house. Will you fix your eyes on this Jesus, the author, the beginner, and the finisher, the perfecter of our faith, because he's worth it. We're not meant to hate the world. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy your new cooker. Whatever. We're not meant to hate that stuff. But it's meant to be behind us because there's only one person in front of us, and it's him. Let's pray together. So, just in the quietness before the band start playing, and it's a moment for us to be still. Maybe for each one of us, just to kind of stand back like the psalmist does as he writes this song, and ask ourselves, what kind of song am I singing to myself? What kind of song? Is it a song of envy, a song of greed, a song of jealousy, a song of desire? And maybe as you look at the perspective on your life, you know that there's a choice for you this morning. A choice for every single one of us. And it's, are you going to fix your eyes and your heart and your life on those things? Are you going to fix your eyes on Jesus and follow him? Because he's worth it. He loves you. He died to clean you and forgive you and restore you to your heavenly Father. He's worth you fixing your heart and your eyes and your mind and your life on him. So even in the quietness, will you just say, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to let go of the stuff that's got a hold of me. I'm going to follow you with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, and with all my strength. Follow him. Just in the quietness. Make that kind of prayer your own. I'm going to sing some songs just to reflect in worship. But as we do, it may be this morning you just know you would love to be prayed for. And we love praying with you. It's one of the privileges that we have, just to be able to pray with people who are saying, I want more of God in my life. I'm asking him to heal me. I want more of God in my life. I'm asking him to release me from my past. I want more of God in my life. I'm asking him to forgive me. I want more of God in my life. I want to follow him. Fix my life on him. Don't be afraid to come out as we stand and sing. To your right, in the alcove here at the front, there's the prayer team, and we'll be privileged to pray with you. Let's stand, let's sing. God bless you.